That's not him right there? We have a moment to sing? Okay. I can't read lips very well.
Good evening, everyone. We are going to sing a little bit to get in the spirit of Sukkot for those who just arrived. So let's join with the cantor. We'll sing a little
Should we show the rabbi what we learned together while he was away? I think we should. In fact, they teach you when you're learning a nigun that every time you repeat it, you actually elevate it by a half step chromatically so that we musically get closer and closer and closer to the divine. So here we go. It's actually 2 steps chromatically. Yanai, yanai, yanai. Yananai, 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 Last time all the way through. The clapping is nice. Last part.
Thank you, cantor.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Erev Tov, good evening, everyone. Chag Sameach, happy holiday. This is Man Simchatenu, the season of our rejoicing, Sukkot, the happiest moments of the year, the moments when we go outside, and if we're fortunate enough to live in New England, feel the crispness of an autumn day, build a sukkah, and a week later, take it down. And why do we build a sukkah and take it down? To remind us that while we may build and build and build physical structures, we know what is most valuable is the eternal values that we share, the love that we create in this world. And let's not confuse the two as we strive towards holy lives. And so we explore tonight the sacredness of life and how to experience joy. I can't think of a more appropriate way to celebrate Sukkot than with our author this evening. Before we introduce him, I just want to invite Allison Kerr, our executive director. Oh, great. To just share a brief word, and then we're going to jump into our learning.
Hi, everyone. Oh, it's so great to see everyone tonight. So I just want to share that Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel taught us that the beginning of our happiness lies in understanding that life without wonder is not worth living. Heschel called this wonder radical amazement. Sukkot encourages us to experience not only with our minds, but also with our bodies. When we go into the sukkah, we can feel the cold air. We shake the lulav in many, many directions. We're using our bodies, we're using our minds, we're using our hearts. Everything is part of our experience of Sukkot. Wonder is actually with us all the time. It's with us every day. We just have to be attuned to it. We have to open our eyes and see what is around us. Heschel shares that this kind of wonder is central to Jewish wisdom and practice and action. So, where do you find wonder? How do you experience radical amazement? Think about it. If you are an adult seeker looking for spiritual uplift in a troubled world, looking for inspiration from our texts and tradition, looking for hope by repairing our world, join us in the BEIT, the Beth Elohim Institute for Transformation. If you're looking to explore new countries, to breathe deeply, to find support in the words of Torah or the helping hand of a community member, join us in the BEIT. If you're finished schlepping kids, if you are seeking a post-October 7th connection to Jewish community, if you are ready to engage in a spiritual search grounded in Jewish wisdom, if you are itching to get your hands dirty cooking, shaping clay, planting, or cleaning a local park, if you are excited about getting together in smaller groups to deepen your relationships, this is your moment. Join us in the BEIT. If you have the time, we have the opportunities for you to exercise your curiosity, cultivate community, take hopeful action, explore the world, and experience the kind of wonder that will leave you amazed. If you want to explore these ideas, these possibilities further, please check out our website, and also feel free to contact my colleagues or me. My colleagues, Rabbi Vanessa Harper, who's done an amazing amount of work to help build the BEIT, as well as Hannah Richmond Carney, who also oversees the Well, which is part of our spiritual connections work. We hope also that you'll join us this Sunday for the Harvest Festival, as well as on October 4th for a light dinner that TBE is providing, and a program featuring keynote speakers Abigail Pogrobin and Rabbi Dov Linzer, with an opportunity to learn more about how you can tap into wonder and transformation through specific programs in the BEIT this year. Thank you so much, and Chag Sameach.
In addition, I've been asked to announce that the new TB Business Networking Group is meeting at 7 a.m. on November 13th. And a senior lecturer from Harvard Business School and Temple member Jeff Busgang will be kicking off the meeting on the topic, it's something AI related. The impact AI has on business and entrepreneurship. So, November 13th. Now, to tonight, it is great to introduce our guests. Before we do, I want to welcome the scores and scores and scores and scores of people on Zoom who are joining us and have been patient since 7 o'clock. I want to thank our speaker, Arthur Brooks, in advance for starting at 7:30 because I made the mistake, even though he had arrived much earlier to begin at 7 o'clock, but was able to wait for us. And I'm deeply grateful for that. I first want to thank Len Schlesinger, who couldn't be here. Len is a longtime member and a dear friend, and the past president of Babson College, teacher at Harvard Business School, limited corporation, lots of wonderful accomplishments through the years, but most importantly, a mensch, and helped coordinate this evening. So I'm deeply grateful for Len. And now it's a great pleasure to introduce Arthur Brooks, as many of you know because I described him a few days ago on Yom Kippur. But he is a professor at the Harvard Kennedy School and Harvard Business School, where he teaches courses on leadership and happiness. And for many of us, we know him as the columnist at The Atlantic, who writes the popular weekly How to Build a Life column. As you know from the book that I described recently, it is the #1 New York Times best-selling, or he is the #1 New York Times best-selling author of 13 books, including the one that was on the tables, Build the Life You Want, co-authored with Oprah Winfrey. And you could find on those tables From Strength to Strength, Finding Success, Happiness, and Deep Purpose in the Second Half of Life. And so I am thrilled that he can be here with us this evening to speak for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll have the opportunity to ask questions. So, Arthur Brooks.
Thank you, Rabbi.
I'm going to shut this off.
Thank you.
Good work.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for that gracious introduction, and thank you to all of you. What a delight it is to be with you. It's an honor for me to help you kick off this wonderful celebration. As you heard in the introduction, I'm a behavioral scientist teaching at the Harvard Business School, and I teach classes on happiness. When I tell people that, they say, you teach at a business school, it must be accounting or finance or management or supply chain management or something businessy like that. I say, no, I teach happiness. And they think I'm lying. How can that be a proper topic for business? Well, the truth of the matter is that I believe that each of our lives is an enterprise. I believe it's a holy enterprise, as a matter of fact. And when you're going to undertake an enterprise, you better understand the currency with which you're trying to accumulate the fortune for that enterprise. And in this life, it's love and happiness. I've dedicated my career and my life to lifting people up and bringing them together in bonds of happiness and love using science and ideas. And I'm privileged to be able to teach the science behind happiness at the Harvard Business School. I have about 180 students enrolled in my happiness class, a class that I actually co-created with Len Schlesinger. I'm so grateful to him for bringing me to the Harvard Business School and showing me the ropes. We created this class together, and now with 180 students and 400 on the waiting list, it's a popular elective. There's even an illegal Zoom link they think I'm not aware of. That's what I'm going to talk about here tonight, and that's the subject of the book that many of you have. Thank you very much for that. And I'm really thrilled to talk about happiness with you tonight to kick off the celebration, because this is the happiest holiday. This is a holiday that the whole world needs, Sukkot. Both the Feast of Tabernacles and the Holiday of the Harvest, it lends itself to what I'm trying to do with my work. In fact, it has bold claims around it that most of you, all of you I suspect, are really aware of. In Talmudic writings, it's written that any Jew who has not celebrated Sukkot never saw rejoicing in his lifetime. How many holidays can make this claim? I have never heard anybody ever saying, I never recall anybody saying that Christmas is guaranteed to make you happy. I know a lot of people who are certainly not happy on most holidays, let alone the idea that you can't truly be happy if you don't celebrate Christmas. But that's the claim. I want to investigate that. And if I do my job, I want to give you the tools tonight to make it true, notwithstanding anything that's going on in your life, and inspiring the rest of the world with that truth. Now, that might seem difficult or impossible this year. We've just passed the first anniversary of the horrible massacre that shocked the entire world, that saddened everybody. And it might seem for you or for me or for any, Sukkot's joyful celebration is out of reach this year. But what I want to argue is that actually this is the perfect year to celebrate Sukkot, because this holiday holds the secret to being joyful even when you don't feel it. The secret to being joyful in times of greatest suffering. And for that, it's an example to the whole world, a world that needs to learn how to rejoice. So where do we begin? Let's begin with what happiness is. On my first day of class, I always ask my students, you must know what happiness is or you wouldn't have enrolled in my class. And then I do it at Harvard, what we call cold calling. This is where you pick people out of the class and you make them answer a question, whether they're ready or not. It makes them intensely unhappy. And I say, to the ones I call, define it. And here's what they say. It's always the same. Happiness is the feeling I get when I'm with the people that I love. Or happiness is how I feel when I'm doing what I enjoy. And I say, that's beautiful. That's lovely. That's wrong. And that's good news. Happiness is not a feeling. Happiness has feelings associated with it, but more or less like your Thanksgiving dinner has a smell associated with it. Feelings are evidence of happiness, like the smell of your turkey is evidence of Thanksgiving. Don't confuse the two, or you'll be very disappointed on Thanksgiving Day, because all there will be is a smell. If you're searching for the feeling of happiness, you're leaving it up to your emotions and to circumstances and to things outside of you. And you don't have to. This is good news that I bring you as a happiness scientist. Because happiness is something that's more tangible than feelings. Here's the real definition. Happiness is a combination of three things that you can get better at and form your habits around and share with other people. Happiness is a combination of enjoyment and satisfaction and meaning. Those are the three things that you need. You need to enjoy your life, you need to find satisfaction in your accomplishments, and you need to find the meaning of your existence. Those are the three things to pursue. The pursuit of happiness is the pursuit of those three. Well, if we're going to use the metaphor of the Thanksgiving dinner, those are the three macronutrients of happiness. And you need to have your macronutrients in both balance and abundance. The problem is that's not how we think today. The reason that my students talk about their feelings is because that's all we ever talk about in modern society today, isn't it? My feelings. I felt this. I felt that. You know, why did you say such a mean thing to her? Because I felt angry, as if this were some sort of justification. This gives emotions in the current culture control over us, managerial control over our lives. The most important thing that I teach my students is how to manage themselves. This is the ultimate leadership skill, is leadership over the enterprise of you. And that starts with an understanding of your emotions and how you can manage them. Here's a crash course on that, not that you need it, but my 20-something students certainly do. Here's how your emotions actually work. And this starts with a basic description of the marvels, the miracle, the divine miracle that is the human brain. The human brain can be described as a set of three basic functions that have been organized with respect to how old they are evolutionarily. At the bottom of the heap, the most basic neurocognitive functions that we have, they come from what we call the reptilian brain. This is the oldest part of the human brain that was evolved more than 40 million years ago. It's your brainstem and your cerebellum and all the stuff in the back of your head. And what it does, fundamentally, is to perceive the outside world below your level of consciousness. It's extraordinary. Millions of signals every single day that you're not conscious of. And this is basically how you stay alive. You know what's going on without perceiving it. Right now, you're using your reptilian brain in many ways. You perceive what I'm saying. You're looking at me and you see the light around you. You can perceive the air temperature. You know more or less how many people are around you and the fact that they're not a threat to you. All of that is going on in your reptilian brain. And it's sending signals to the second part of your brain, which is called the limbic system. That's newer. That was evolved between 2 and 40 million years ago, and we call it the paleomammalian brain because we have that in common with all the mammals. Your dog has a limbic system. A squirrel outside has a limbic system. And here's the job of the limbic system: to take those signals from the primitive part of the brain, those signals about what's going on outside, and to translate them into a universal language called emotions. That's what feelings are. They're data. They're information. That's hugely important to my students. Why? Because they've been walking around in their whole lives, in modern life, talking about good feelings and bad feelings. I want to have more good feelings. I don't want to have bad feelings, fear and anger and disgust and sadness. I want to get those out of my life. Oh, really? You'd be dead in a week without your negative emotions. Why? Because all they are signals to you about the outside world. Negative emotions say there's a threat. Positive emotions say there's an opportunity. This is the way that you stay alive. This is how our brain was developed. And it's a miracle that we have these things. Give thanks for your negative emotions. That's why you're still alive. Now, this is a revelation to my students, but this is not the end of the story. There's a third part of the brain, the newest part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the marvel of the human brain. 30% of your brain by weight. It's a bumper of tissue behind your forehead, and that's where your emotional information goes. So that you can say, there's a threat, or there's an opportunity, what does it mean, and what am I going to do? That's the C-suite of your brain. That's what you're using right now to perceive my words and their meaning. That's an incredible set of events that's going on every day. Detection, emotion, decision. What a wonderful thing. Sometimes it breaks down, to be sure. Now, if 1 to 2 breaks down so that detection of signals is not transmitted into emotions, you're in big trouble. You're going to get run over by a car or eaten by a tiger. That's probably not going to happen. 2 to 3 is a more common breakdown, where your emotions don't get to your prefrontal cortex, and so you're being managed by your emotions and acting or reacting in a way that does not reflect what you want. Now, you've known reactive people, people with bad tempers, people who can't control their emotions. There's a lot of people like that. There's a whole class of people around us right now that's having breakdown after breakdown of the limbic system to the prefrontal cortex. These are called little kids. Little kids have no emotional control because they lack the synaptic wiring between their limbic system and their prefrontal cortex. That's when they're angry, that's why when they're angry they yell, and when they're sad they cry, and when they don't get what they want, they scream. That's why, because of a lack of wiring. What do you say to your kids when they're little? Use your words. That's basically saying, don't be so limbic. Use your prefrontal cortex. I talk to my kids that way, you know. They'll be in therapy at 40. But you don't say that, but what you want them to do is to practice the skill and wire their brains. Now, what happens when we grow up? Well, the wiring naturally happens, but it happens later than most people think. In human females, the wiring is not complete between the limbic system and prefrontal cortex until they're 21 years old. In men, it's 70. This explains a lot. Okay, so then the real question becomes this. We all fall prey to emotional reactivity from time to time, don't we? We say things that we don't want. We say things that we regret. This is part of life. This is what everybody was doing on Yom Kippur. I was talking about those lapses, reactive moments, the regret that we have as a result, the resolutions to do better. There's a technique for doing better. How can you build up these pathways? And the answer is metacognition. This is the skill of self-management of emotions. The most important skill that I teach business leaders is the management over their own emotions, which is called metacognition. Metacognition is all about the set of techniques that gives you time in your prefrontal cortex for your emotions to catch up, and you can make decisions about how you want to act as opposed to how you feel like acting. There's a huge set of ways that you can do this. Some people do this with a use of philosophy, Stoic philosophy, as a matter of fact. Stoic philosophy is all about metacognition. It's all about self-management. It works. A lot of studies on that. There's some people who turn to Vipassana meditation, which is a very effective technique of self-reflection, where I would say to myself, Arthur is feeling sad and angry right now. I wonder why. Looking at myself at a certain remove as if I were in the third person. Some people are serious about intercessory prayer. Some people use prayer in a way that's highly metacognitive, where you take your emotions and you present them to God and say, I don't understand these emotions. And in so doing, you have moved them from your limbic system into your prefrontal cortex. You are no longer reactive. But here's one of the ways that and by the way, I recommend all these things and I practice all of them. But here's a technique that I want to talk about in particular because it bears on the topic at hand today, which is this wonderful celebration. There's a technique of metacognition that was invented by one of the greatest psychologists who ever lived. He was a professor at Harvard University. He was also a columnist at The Atlantic, where I write. William James. William James, the father of modern psychology, who in the late 19th century revolutionized the way that we understand the brain and we understand ourselves. What a great man. I like to call him my colleague, William James. This is what we do at Harvard, is we take glory for other people's accomplishments. He invented a principle that today we call the as-if principle. William James showed in his research that if you want to behave in a particular, if you want to feel a particular emotion, if you want to adopt a particular virtue, act as if you possessed that emotion or virtue, notwithstanding your feelings. Now, here was his hypothesis. We all think, especially in modern life, that I can't do something unless I feel like doing it. I can't be grateful unless I feel gratitude. I can't be humble unless I feel humility. William James said, no. Do you want to be grateful? Express gratitude. You run the causality backwards, he said. Do you want to be humble? Pretend you're humble. He was the ultimate fake it till you make it kind of psychologist. Now, it sounds like a big pop theory. It turns out it's manifestly true. There's research study after research study that shows that you can do this. There's a wonderful study from 2014 where a team of psychologists set out to see with graduate students and undergraduates at a major university whether or not they could increase their levels of humility. I mean, imagine. I mean, he would have failed at Harvard, but what they wanted to do was to put students through humility training. They had to go through 7.5 hours of exercises where they would look at becoming more open to ideas. They would try to acquire a broader perspective on things. They would focus on others more and themselves less. And what did they find? They found that on average, after 7.5 hours of these exercises, that the participants were 8% more humble. It's very precise, isn't it? But the bottom line is this. It didn't matter how humble the students were at the beginning of the exercise. What mattered was how humble they were at the end after they practiced humility through the instructions of the scientists. So what are we saying here? You want to be humble? Act like you're humble. Do what humble people do. Be in a posture of humility is what that says. And by the way, what did they also find, which they were not expecting? They found that the more humble the participants were at the end, the greater their capacity was for forgiveness and for patience and the greatest reduction that they experienced in negative feelings. Act more humble, be happier. It's simple. Even a child could do it. Gratitude works in exactly the same way. I've been studying gratitude for many years, and everybody knows that gratitude is a good thing to do. And there's a reason that we don't naturally feel grateful. If your spouse says, oh, you're so ungrateful. Well, welcome to planet Earth. Welcome to humanity. We have a tendency called the negativity bias that's evolved into us where you pay attention to the worst things and not to the best things. Why? Because negative emotions better get your attention. They will save your life. Positive emotions are nice to have. So you're always thinking about the bad things that could happen and the bad things that are happening and the resentments that you have. And you find yourself saying outrageously ungrateful things all the time. Like, you know, first class in United Airlines has really gone downhill. You're in first class. But that's not what you remember. You're ungrateful because that's the negativity bias. It's not you, it's us. It's how we're wired. But we can fight against it. Very interesting study at the University of California in Santa Barbara, where undergraduate students, once again, all these studies use undergraduates because they'll do anything for $20. And what they did was they started a gratitude list, and that was a counting of blessings exercise where they were asked on Sunday nights to write the 5 things they were most grateful for. Some were profound and some were stupid. My team won, my mother loves me, whatever it is, whatever they were most grateful for on Sunday nights. And then every day over the course of the week, they were asked to look at their list for 2 minutes per item, 10 minutes a day. Next Sunday, update the list. At the end of 10 weeks, they were on average 12% more grateful and fundamentally happier than they had been. You can turn up the amplitude of your gratitude. And by the way, gratitude is just reality. Think about the lives that we live. Resentment is predominant because of our evolution, but gratitude is paying attention to true reality, and reality is a good thing. We have to pay attention to what's real, however. Now finally, to get to the point that I'm really trying to make here, you can actually joyfully celebrate by deciding to do so. You know, this gets us to the sort of the essence of the holiday, I think. And a holiday per se doesn't necessarily stimulate positive emotion. My father used to call Thanksgiving the government-mandated thankfulness holiday, which gives you a little bit of information about my father of blessed memory. He was a wonderful man and funny to boot. But it's true that people don't necessarily feel things on holidays, and maybe some of you on what are supposed to be joyful holidays feel a little bit of guilt when you don't. But it really depends on how you decide to celebrate the occasion, and this is what another study showed. A study with Spanish and Chilean psychologists found that when holidays were purposively ritualized with joyful celebration, no matter what the feelings were of the celebrants, that they became joyful on the holiday. The sukkah is where you find joy when you're there, even if you go in without the joy. That's what the study shows. They feel joy because they've made a commitment to celebrate. And that, my friends, is the genius of this holiday. And that's what the world needs. This is a celebration, as everybody knows, of both harvest and a commemoration of Exodus. It's a dual-purpose, joyful holiday that asks us to be both humble and grateful. I didn't bring up those virtues arbitrarily. No matter how you feel for 7 days, for example, practice humility as you recall being delivered from the hands of the Egyptians. You will become humbler, and that will make you more patient and kind and happy. Now, that's hard for some people. It's hard for some people. That was another joke that my father used to make. You know, on his birthdays, we would celebrate, especially as he was getting a little bit older. And we would talk about his virtues, and we would toast his virtues. He's a wonderful family man. We would say he's a loving father. He's a wonderful professor beloved by his students. We'd go through them one by one. And at the end, my father would say, and nothing about my humility? Whether it's hard for you or not, practice this. And the humility that should come as we remember being delivered will come to us. Count your blessings as you see the abundance of whatever your harvest happens to be, and you will become more satisfied with your life. This is hard sometimes too, isn't it? It's so hard to be grateful sometimes, depending on what's going on in our lives and what's going on in the world. I understand this. But I've seen it, and it's interesting because the person who leads me in paths of righteousness is my wife, Esther. The best person I've ever met. And she's an example of counting blessings when blessings can't seem to be counted very well. I remember, this is a classic, now a tale told every year in my family, when my son, my middle son, I have 3 kids, they're 26, 24, and 21, and now I'm a grandfather as well. But my middle son, Carlos, he was my problem child. Many of you have a problem child. At some point, they will probably apologize to you, I hope. And my problem child, I mean, it was when he was high school, I remember this. It was just one crisis after another. It was really about his living up to his potential, which he never did. And we were getting constant calls from the headmaster of the prep school where he attended. Carlos didn't show up for his exams today. Carlos failed math. Carlos just got a D in history. Carlos might not graduate on time. Carlos doesn't look like college material. These are the calls that we got. And finally, Esther reflecting on this one night as we were agonizing it. She said, I think we should be really grateful. I said, grateful? Huh. She said, at least we know he's not cheating. My son's not cheating. Baruch Hashem. And finally, there's celebration. The holiest celebration is that which you undertake when you don't feel it, but you decide to celebrate and give thanks. Gathering with family and friends to share in food and drink, seeing that there is life to celebrate, and you're independent of your feelings and managing yourself. Sukkot devised an ancient formula for joy. No matter how you feel, for 7 days, practice humility, count your blessings, and gather with your family and friends to celebrate, and joy will find you. That's the promise. Now, it might find others as well. It just might. See, there's also a third name, as I'm sure you're all aware, that this is the Festival of Lights. Because the people in ancient Jerusalem would light great lamps, and that would illuminate the entire city. And that light would be seen for hundreds of miles out into the countryside from people who are not in Jerusalem. This is the prophet Zechariah. And it shall be one day that shall be known to the Lord, neither day nor night, and it shall come to pass that at eventide it shall be light. Extraordinary thing to see, especially in the ancient world. And from miles around, Jerusalem would be brilliant, a gleaming beacon, and across the countryside, people would rejoice at the sight of the holy city. That light, in fact, is what Sukkot is to me. See, I'm way out in the countryside. I'm not in Jerusalem. I'm not a Jew. I'm a Catholic. What I am is a Catholic inspired by Sukkot, which is why I'm here tonight. It represents what I want to be and the spirit that I want in my life. Your light is illuminating what I need in my life. And in point of fact, what the world needs is this holiday, and how you can choose to react to this holiday, and what people witness in the way that you celebrate. Now, as a Christian, I come here to offer my thoughts on Sukkot with some trepidation. I've got some nerve, quite frankly. I admit that. But here's the thing. See, my church, the Catholic Church, teaches me that I'm your little brother. I'm your little brother in faith. That's what the church teaches us. And a little brother, quite frankly, is not somebody from whom you should take a lot of advice, necessarily. We're not the best source. But I do bring these ideas to you with what a little brother should have in abundance for his older sisters and older brothers. That's gratitude and humility and love. So good Yom Tov. Happy Sukkot. And thank you. Thank you.
So, Peter, you had a microphone. Oh, here it is. Great. I was going to start with questions, but I know people brought questions. It can be on the talk or the writings that we've read over these
Or on
past-
anything else, for that matter.
So, any questions? Marcy. Here we go. See how this works. There we go.
I'm sure many of your students, your kids' friends, and the generations following them have a lot of anxiety and depression.
Right.
Where does that fit into this, and how do you advise them based on the science?
Yeah, so that's a great question because, of course, we all know that there's been an explosion of anxiety and depression, and it's particularly been hard for adolescents and young adults. We all see this. We see this in the communities around us, and if it hasn't actually come to your children, congratulations, but it has come to their friends. And I see this among my students. 55% of the students at Harvard University are in some form of therapy at this point. And you can have an opinion or not about the efficacy of therapy and psychiatric treatments, but that's a lot. And that's an unprecedentedly high number. So what do we know from this? We know, based on the research, that there are certain reasons that this is occurring, but it's not clear entirely what's befalling the students. I study happiness and the trends in happiness, and happiness has been trending down a little bit year after year since the early 1990s. So we're 30 years in on a trend of falling happiness, and it's an alarming and bad thing. Why? Well, to begin with, the happiest people, they have 4 things that they all do. They practice faith, they have a family, they have close friends, and they devote their work to the service of others. That's what happy people all have in common. Those are the practices of the happiest people. That's the happiness 401k plan, and all of those things are in decline, especially for young adults. They're less and less likely to have any sense of faith or life philosophy. By the way, I'm not talking about a traditional religious faith like mine or yours, but something that's transcendent to the daily experience of the personal psychodrama that drives us all crazy, where we're unfortunately the star and can't escape. The whole idea that family life is important, which is, once again, is out of reach for so many people. Marriage rates are falling. Fertility rates are falling. People are thinking it's not worth bringing children into the world, and that's an unhappiness scourge that we see. People are less likely to have close friends, and they're less likely to find their work as a vocation. But there's also storms that we see here. There's the storm of the increase in use of devices. From 2008 to 2010, we saw a major uptick in depression and anxiety from young people. That certainly has to do with the use of social media and screens. We see the polarization crisis in American politics, where people hate each other because of politics. And we're encouraging young people to do so. I sit on college campuses. I'm on college campuses every single week, mine and others, and baby boomers my age are conscripting young people into their culture war. That's wrong, and it's all too common. And last but not least, of course, there was the loneliness that came from the coronavirus epidemic, where people were torn away from their friends. The rates of depression increased by fourfold and haven't decreased since then. So this is really what's going on. So what's the answer to that? It's a manifold answer. There's a lot of things that we actually need to do, but what they really have to do with is going back to the values that have always been eternal, that are true. We need more of the young people here, quite frankly, in this community, being part of this community of faith, understanding who they are as people in relation to God. That's my view. That they need to understand the goodness of what a community can do in family life and in friendship, et cetera, et cetera. Now, there are some other things that we need to do with respect to social media, and there also is a lot that we can do to help people understand the meaning in their lives. I'm writing a book right now called The Meaning of Your Life and How to Find It. Wish me luck on that. My editor is very interested in seeing that because it's quite late, that's okay. But these are the things that I'm working on, because it's not a single point answer. There's no silver bullet. We need to go to the things that matter the most. And we, all of us, we need to speak the truth no matter how inconvenient it is, because the lives and the flourishing of our kids is at stake. Thank you.
How does one objectively measure happiness?
It's a good question. What a wonderful question. Thank you. So, happiness is not measured in the same way that it would blood pressure or blood sugar or any of the things that you go to your doctor to see. But the best way of doing it, believe it or not, is by repeatedly asking an anonymous sample of people, a large anonymous sample of people, a pretty simple question, which is this. All things considered in your life, not at this moment, but at this point in your life, think of the happiest person you ever met. That person gets a number 10. Think of the unhappiest person you ever met. That person gets a 1. All things considered, what's your number? It turns out that people, when you ask them anonymously, you don't ask this in front of somebody's spouse because they will lie. You ask them that, they will give you very stable and accurate numbers, but you have to do it carefully. Now, I apply a battery of about 15 happiness tests to my students at HBS, and I make them take them multiple times, and we talk about their limitations, and you can game them, and you can get them wrong, and you can have a bad day, et cetera, but you can have a bad day and flunk your blood pressure test, too. Truth of the matter is that you need to be in a stable situation and give honest answers, and this is the best way that we know, especially in large groups of people, to get happiness measures that we can trust. Thank you for that.
Thank Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed Strength to Strength.
Thank
I
you.
read that this past year. And one of the equations you put forth, which I think is happiness, is your haves over your wants.
Yeah.
And you talk about reducing the denominator.
Yeah.
And I've written that out on a sticky note, and I have it in my desk, over my desk.
That's great.
How do you prescribe that we work on reducing our wants?
Yeah, thank you for that. So what he's referring, what's your name? Jonah. What Jonah's referring to is a fundamental equation that talks about satisfaction. Mother Nature tells you that satisfaction comes from having more. More what? All of it. Money, power, pleasure, fame, all of it, right? And there's a reason for that. Mother Nature really doesn't care if you're happy. Mother Nature wants you to survive and pass on your genes. That's what Mother Nature cares about. Happiness is your business. The problem is that we figure that since we have an urge to do a certain thing and we want to be happy, we cross the cables and think if we give into these urges, we're going to be happy. That's wrong. It turns out that that's wrong. And so the have more formula doesn't bring more satisfaction. Certainly not any satisfaction that endures. The key to becoming more satisfied in an enduring way is not to have everything we want, is to want everything that we have. So how do you do that? Here's the formula Jonah was referring to. Satisfaction equals all the things that you have divided by what you want. You want to become a happier, more satisfied person? You don't need a haves management strategy. You're plenty good at that. You need a wants management strategy. You need to want less. So how do you do that? Well, here's how I do it. I noticed on my 50th birthday, which was it's just in the rearview mirror, I found my bucket list that I'd written on my 40th birthday. Now, what's a bucket list? For those of you who are not familiar with the reference, you probably all are, but if you're not, this is a list of all your cravings and worldly desires. And on your birthday, you write them down and you imagine yourself achieving these things, and it fires you up and motivates you. That's the whole thing. I found my bucket list from when I was 40 of all these have, money, power, pleasure, whatever. And on my 50th birthday, I looked at that list. I'd done every single thing on that list, and I was less happy at 50 than I was at 40. I said, obviously, something's wrong with that old formula. Now, so what did I do? I adopted a technique that I now have called my reverse bucket list. Here's how that works. I still have cravings and desires because I'm a human being. But I will not be managed by those desires. Those desires come from my limbic system, and I want to be governed by my prefrontal cortex. So I write down the desires and I cross them out, not because they're bad or evil or shameful, but because I don't want to be managed by them. Now, I just had a big birthday in May, had a 0 on it. You obviously know it's not 50, and I hope it's obviously also clear that it's not 70. So now you know how old I am. On my reverse bucket list, I thought, what are my big attachments? What's really holding me down? And you know what they were? It was my opinions. I had too many strong opinions. And especially political opinions. And it's hard in America today, right? We all have really strong ideological opinions. But you know what? I need fewer political opinions because I need more friends. So I wrote down my 6 most powerful, strong, inflexible political opinions, and I crossed them out. Not because I don't believe those things. I still believe those things. I still have opinions. But because I will not be managed by my ideology anymore. If you disagree with me, you're my sister, you're my brother, I love you, I don't care. I'm out, baby. That's what I said to the political system. I will not curate my friendships on the basis of politics. I'm not going to do it. And I'm free. I'm free, Jonah. I feel like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. I can be friends with almost literally anybody. And it's a great time to be able to actually do that. And that's how I recommend it, is the reverse bucket list. Thank you for that.
I agree with everything you've said, not that you need that because you're already happy. But when I go around and somebody says, how are you? I say, couldn't be better, best of all possible worlds, not to worry, and under control. It's a mantra. Mm-hmm. What happens is they back off.
Yeah.
A lot of people back off. They don't want, you say, you're not being authentic.
Right.
Because clearly you have problems, because the only people you know who don't have problems are people you don't know well enough to know what their problems are.
Yeah.
So if you're acting like that, I'm not seeing the real you, and they back off from that. So how do you deal with somebody to try to get them to adopt some of your positions because they're the right way to live, I think.
Yeah, you know, and you're living according to the as if principle because in truth you suffer, because we all do. That's part of human life. There is no bliss on this mortal coil, in this earthly plane. We have a lot going on. And by the way, thank God, because only through suffering do we learn and grow. Only through negative emotions do we actually survive. We need the suffering is the bottom line. But what you're saying is, I'm doing my best. And by doing my best and being as positive as I can, the good experiences, the positive emotions, and the and the growth are coming to me. That's what you're actually saying. And that's almost a better way to say it. How's life? You know, life is great. There's ups and downs, but I'm really grateful to be alive on this day. Because that's the truth. That's actually the truth. And it's not off-putting at all. You know, I work with people who are going through tremendous crisis in my private life and in my professional life as well. and you know, I work with people who are, you know, suffering from scary illnesses, for example. And what I'll tell them is to think about it this way. I learned this actually from a pediatric oncologist, so somebody who knew what he was talking about on this. He said, wake up each day and say this, I don't know what this day is going to bring. I don't know what this week and this month is going to bring. I don't know where I'm going to be next year. I don't know. But I do know this. I just woke up, and I will not waste the gift that is this day. And that's the way to live. And that's really what you're saying. And you're trying to find a way to do it where people can say, I want that too. I want that attitude. That's the way I want to live as well, as opposed to thinking, pie in the sky. That's not what you're saying at all. Thank you for that. Hello, Rabbi.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. So as folks in here know, I spend most of my week working with our teen community. And when you were talking about, right, the wiring that happens between the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex, I was thinking back to how many times I've been, you know, sitting in a room with teens who are having very, very strong emotions.
Right.
And I'm just kind of curious, I don't think I have a specific question, but I'd love to hear, you know, what your approach would be. How can I help them navigate their feelings as we work towards better wiring?
Yeah, so that's a great question, actually, because it's something I deal with a lot with my students. You know, my students are not teenagers, but I'm talking to people who have a lot of hard feelings, and one of the biggest problems that they have is not the fact that they have hard feelings. The problem is they've been lied to. They've been lied to. If you go to campus counseling services and say, I'm sad and anxious, they will tell you there's something wrong with you. And that's a lie. We just talked about this, right? Look, if you're studying at Harvard and you're not sad and anxious, then you need therapy. Life is hard, man. I mean, it really is. There's nothing wrong with you for feeling sadness and anxiety. That is not evidence that something's pathologically wrong with you or broken in any way. It might get in your way, don't get me wrong. You might need help. It might be exaggerated. It might be obstructing your ability to live a good life. Let's not think that that's not the case. But it's not prima facie evidence of a pathology. The biggest thing that young people need to hear, and the thing that I have found in my life that they find most reassuring, is to say, of course you're sad. Of course you're anxious. It's normal. You're 18. That's what life is all. So was I, and so am I. And the real question is not, do you have hard feelings? The real question is, what are you learning from them? How are you managing them? How are you growing as a result of them? See, here's the trick. Here's the trick in real life. It's not just being grateful for the good days. It's being grateful for the bad days. It's not just being grateful for the positive emotions. It's gratitude for being alive and having emotions. That's the real trick. That's what gratitude is all about. And you can't do that when people are telling you that you're all broken because you're feeling sad. And you don't even have to have a reason for it. On the contrary, walking through life is a hard exercise, especially when you're trying to grow up at the same time. That reassurance is what I've found is the most positive message that I can give people who are suffering. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi, for your work.
This is genuinely not my argument.
Yes.
I'd love your response for the argument of when can the argument against an excess of gratitude leading to complacency.
Yeah.
Meaning, why fight for more civil rights? You should be grateful for the rights you already have.
Right.
And I know that's genuinely not my argument, but I've seen that strain of thinking.
Yeah.
What would your response be?
So there is a tendency to think that if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention, you're not going to do something good in life, and that's actually wrong. The people who truly have done the most in this world are the people who are most equilibrated and able to recognize the good things as well as just the bad things. The people who are most paralyzed in life are the people who, and this is a matter of what we find in the behavioral science, people who are most paralyzed, unable to take action where action is needed, are the ones where they think everything is already terrible and nothing can be done to fix it. And that's why trying to activate our students into and our children into a culture war is such a dangerous and deleterious thing to do. That's a bad thing to do, to tell your kids the world is terrible. You know how many young people I've talked to who say, I'm not having kids because of the environment? Right? I get it. I'm concerned about the climate too. I'm concerned about it. But to not have children as a result of that, that's a nihilism. It's right out of Friedrich Nietzsche. It's the worst. And how does that come about? Because they're paralyzed to be able to try to create greater good in the world for human life, for God's creation, because they've been made so negative by the idea that gratitude is completely impermissible, it's inappropriate, that's a radical stance, and it's also a profoundly unhuman stance as well. So you can be plenty concerned with what's going on. You can be angry about what's going on, but you better know what's going right as well, or you're not going to be able to put the things in perspective and you'll be deactivated from that. Thank you for that wonderful question.
Hi, thank you. You made reference to the 3 definitions of happiness,
Yep.
and I agree to those, but I often think of mindset. And I think this ties in a little bit about teenagers and how do you get their thinking to be different.
Yeah.
But so often I feel like there are many people, the glass is always half full.
Right.
And to be able to switch that, and some people say, well, I'm just wired that way. And it's like, no, but you don't have to be. And I know it's practice,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I just want to know your thoughts on that.
Sure, absolutely. So, and there's a lot of work on mindset and basic attitude. But really what we're talking about here is actually not happiness, it's unhappiness. Unhappiness and happiness are not opposites. They're largely processed in different hemispheres of the brain. If you think that your unhappiness is a lack of happiness, you've got it wrong. Happiness is not like light, where light is the absence of darkness. That's true. Happiness is not the absence of unhappiness and vice versa. On the contrary, you can be an unusually happy person and an unusually unhappy person. That means you're a high affect person. So when we're talking about mindset, largely what we're talking about is trying to manage our negative affect. We're trying to manage our negative moods because, in many cases, you're above average in negative affect. I am an incredibly high positive affect person, 95th percentile in positive affect. I'm also at the 90th percentile in negative affect. I'm an incredibly high affect person. That makes me very hard to live with, which my wife reminded me of this very morning. So what do I need to do? I need to work on my mindset. I need to work on my attitude because I need to manage my negative affect. My challenge is not trying to raise my positive affect. My challenge is learning to lower my negative affect. That's why I start my morning really early and I go to the gym for an hour and then I go to mass every morning. Right? Why? Because I need to manage my negative affect, and that's the healthy way to do it. What's the unhealthy way to do it? Yelling at other people, workaholism, alcohol misuse. That's how people ordinarily do it, and that's the wrong way to do it. And so the mindset that we're talking about is the mindset that says, oh, yes, this is how I'm wired, and I can actually manage that. That's the positive mindset toward negative affect. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Can you say more about how to walk with people in the world who
How to
don't
what?
how to walk with people in the world
Right.
who don't have the same
Right.
ideal?
Yeah. Yeah, so I've actually done experiments where I want to understand how people communicate depending on how I start a conversation between them. And so I've seen experiments, and I've participated in experiments, where we try to get Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump supporters to talk to each other, right? It's fun stuff. Now, the way that you don't do this is that you say, okay, convince each other about your candidate. That's not how you do it, right? It comes to blows. You're an idiot, right? How do you do it? You start the conversation by saying, okay, you're going to talk about politics here in a minute, but for the first 10 minutes, I want you to tell each other about your kids. Now, what happens? They're actually they're activating a neuropeptide in the brain that functions as a hormone called oxytocin. You talk about your kids, you stimulate the love hormone, the love molecule in your brain. Now, this is a very interesting evolved neuropeptide that we produce endogenously, such that we know our kin and they know us, and it's intensely pleasurable. When you lay eyes on your newborn child, like the 4th of July in your head, that's oxytocin. I believe it's God's gift. I believe that it's a miracle that we have this. And you want to elicit that among strangers and have them bond to each other, talk about their shared mutual loves. That's how you do it. And by the way, if they have teenage kids, it's like shared mutual enemy. So it's beautiful, then they really bond to, oh, your kid, or my kid wrecked the car last week, And then there's no way to hate each other. It's just so weird. You talk about the things that we both love, and we can't find our way to hate because we put it in perspective automatically. It's like, yeah, I told you about my kids and how much I love my kids, and you told me about yours, and I related to you, and Trump, yeah, I don't know, whatever. Whatever. This is a world full of beauty and full of miracles and God's gift to us. And where do we see it? In the way that we're made in his image. And where do we see that in our children? And you love yours, and I love mine, and I love yours a little bit too. And you can go vote, that's good. That's how we walk together, is with shared loves, not differences. Now, the world wants us to tell we're all so different. We're all so different than one another. No, we're not. No, we aren't. And that's what we need to reinforce in our children and remember in our lives. And in doing that, look, it's not going to change your political views. That's fine. The point is that your political views are a lot less important than the fact that we're walking across the face of the earth together and doing the best that we can.
What a beautiful place to close this evening. Arthur, we thank you for such a beautiful teaching.
Thank you, Rabbi.
I am so grateful. What a beautiful evening of learning and an incredible way to enter into Sukkot. We will have services tomorrow at 10 o'clock. The celebration of Sukkot will continue all week with visits through the Sukkah, with our fall festival on Sunday, and we're looking forward to sharing this celebration together. But what a wonderful way to learn from you. So once again, thank you. Thank you. Really fantastic. I really want to thank Arthur for being with us. This was a rare treat. I hope you can stick around for 5 minutes, but then he'd wake up early, go to the gym, and then to Mass. What time does Mass inspire us all each day?
6:50.
6:50. That's dedication. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Chag Sameach, everybody.